Hello, everybody out there in the virtual world. We are going to do lesson 6 in unit 9. The first thing I'm going to remind you is to always be in degree mode. And the second thing I'm going to remind you is this is mixed applications of trigonometry. So some we're going to be finding the sides, some will be finding the angles. So the sine of any angle, I'm going to call it A, is equal to the opposite length divided by the hypotenuse length. The cosine of any angle is equal to the adjacent length over the hypotenuse, and the tangent of any angle is equal to the opposite length divided by the adjacent length. So if you have the TI-84, make sure that you are in degree mode. And at the beginning of each problem, I went ahead and I wrote down very shorthand SOHCAHTOA to remind me the side lengths. So it says in number 1, the do now, determine the measure of the marked reference angle A and B to the nearest tenth of a degree in the following triangles. So the first thing I always like to do is from the right angle, I know the side across from the right angle is the hypotenuse. From the given angle, in this case B, the side across from it is called the opposite, which means the third side is the adjacent. So to set this one up, I know that I have the opposite side and I have the hypotenuse, and the only trig function that uses opposite and hypotenuse at the same time is the sine function. So I like to start with my formula, and then I fill in what I have. The sine of the angle, well, in this case I don't have the angle, so I need to use the inverse function. So sine to the negative 1 is equal to the opposite length divided by the hypotenuse length, and that's going to equal my angle of B. So in my calculator, I do second sine, and then I'm going to do 20 divided by 21, and I'm going to get my answer of 72.24. 72.24 equals B. So remember, we're rounding to the 10th, so I'm going to look at the next number. Since it's less than 5, my final answer is 72.2 degrees. So you guys try the next one, label your triangle, and meet me back here. So far, I hope that you figured out that you're going to use cosine because we have the adjacent side to angle A, and we also have the hypotenuse. So we fill into our formula. Since I don't have the angle, I'm using the inverse function. The adjacent side has a length of 7, the hypotenuse has a length of 10, and that's going to equal my angle A. So when I hit second cosine, 7 divided by 10, I get an answer of 45.57. Now remember, we're rounding to the nearest tenth, so I look at the next number. Since it's more than 4, that 5 becomes a 6. So A is 45.6 degrees. Example number 2 says find the missing side lengths A and B in the triangle below using trig ratios, and then again round your answer to the nearest tenth if necessary. So because they give you all the angles, you could actually use the 30 or the 60 degree angle. The right angle lets you know that 50 represents a hypotenuse. I'm going to use angle 60 as my reference angle, which means B is going to be my opposite length and A is going to be my adjacent. So in order to find the length of angle of side A, I am looking for my adjacent and I have my hypotenuse. Now the only trig function which uses adjacent and hypotenuse at the same time is my cosine function. So I'm going to plug this in. The cosine of angle A, this time I have the angle at 60 degrees. That's equal to the adjacent side of A divided by the hypotenuse of 50. So now we have a proportion. We're going to cross multiply. So the cosine of 60 times 50 is going to be equal to A. When I type that into my calculator, the cosine of 60 times 50 is going to be 25. So now I'm going to find side B, which is opposite of angle 60, and I still have my hypotenuse. So the sine function of any angle uses the length of the opposite divided by the length of the hypotenuse. So I fill into my formula. The sine of angle A, well in this case it's 60 degrees, the opposite length is length of B, and the hypotenuse is 50. So once again, I'm going to set up my proportion, and in order to solve a proportion, we're going to cross multiply and solve. You end up getting the sine of 60 times 50 is equal to the length of B. So once again, I type that into my calculator. I got 43.30. Since I'm rounding to the 10th, that's the first decimal place. The next number after the 3 is less than 5. So my answer is 43.3. Excellent job. I'll meet you on the next page. Example number 3, approaches an angle of elevation. That's the angle formed by the horizontal looking up. Elevation, like an elevator, takes you to the top. To the top of a tree is 20 degrees. How far away to the nearest tenth is the roach from the tree if the tree's height is 31 feet? So I like to start out with my formulas to remind myself I'm using trigonometry. make sure you're in degree mode. So I'm going to use my fantastic artistic skills here and draw you guys a little roach. And the roach is looking up. So the horizontal line looking up is 20 degrees. And he's looking at the top of a tree. Here we go. So you can see my great artistic skills here. The tree is perpendicular to the ground. So it says that the tree's height is 31 feet, and we want to know how far is the roach from the tree. So I see that this is a right triangle. I know nothing about my hypotenuse, but from the 20-degree angle, I have my opposite side and my adjacent side. So the only trig function that uses those two at the same time is going to be my sine function. Just kidding. I'm actually going to use my tangent function, which is the length of the opposite divided by the length of the adjacent. I don't have any information about hypotenuse, so I can't use sine or cosine. So I'm going to fill in the information I have. The tangent of 20 degrees is equal to the length of the opposite side over the length of the adjacent side. When I form my proportion and I cross multiply, notice here I get the tangent of 20 times x equals 31. So to solve for x, I have to divide by the tangent of 20. So then you're going to type that into your calculator and get your answer. So I see that my answer is 85.17 since I'm rounding to the nearest tenth. The number after the 1 is 7, so it's more than 5. So my final answer is 85.2 feet. All right, the next question. Remember, make sure you're in degree mode and write down your trig functions. And then we're going to draw a beautiful picture after you read the question. An airplane is flying at a height of 2 miles above the ground. So here's my beautiful airplane, and it is 2 miles above the ground. The distance along the ground from the airplane to the traffic controller is 5 miles. What is the angle from the ground controller at the airport to the airplane? So they're asking you to find this angle here, and they want you to round to the nearest tenth. So pause the video, label your triangle, and come back and let's see if you picked the right trig function. So hopefully you've labeled the hypotenuse, which we know nothing about, so it can't be sine or cosine, and the opposite side is 2, the adjacent side is 5. So we're going to plug into our tangent formula. So the tangent of an angle, well, that's what I'm looking for, so I'm using the inverse function. The opposite side is 2 miles, the adjacent side is 5 miles, and that's going to give me my angle of x. So when I plug that into my calculator, I end up with 21.80 is equal to x. And they did ask me to round to the nearest tenth. So since the next number after the tenth place, which is that 8, is 0, which is less than 5, my final answer is 21.8 degrees. You're doing a great job. I'll meet you on the next page. Example number 5, we have a man and he's taking a nap. Oh, he's so sleepy, he's laying down. He's on level ground and he is 1,000 feet away from the base of a 350-foot tall building. Now building, last time I checked, makes a 90-degree angle with the ground. Find the nearest degree, so we want the whole degree this time, the measure of the angle of elevation. So remember, the angle of elevation is formed by the horizontal looking up. So they're looking for this angle here. So from the right angle, I know nothing about my hypotenuse, but from the angle, I have my opposite side for 350, and my adjacent side is 1,000. So hopefully you guessed that correctly. We are going to use the tangent function. So the tangent, the angle measure I don't know, so I'm using the inverse function, -1, is equal to the opposite, 350, divided by the adjacent of 1,000. And that's going to give me my answer of the angle measure. So when I put this in my calculator, I hit the second key, I hit the tangent key, that gives me the inverse function. I do 350 divided by 1,000, and that gives me an answer of 19.2 is equal to the value of x. They want me to round to the nearest whole number, the nearest degree, so since the number after the 9 is less than 5, my final answer is 19 degrees. Number 6, notice how I started with SOHCAHTOA, and remember, don't forget to be in degree mode. In right triangle ABC, so I'm going to draw myself a right triangle. Now just be very careful here. You have to be very, very careful. Which angle is the right angle? Angle A is 32 degrees. Angle B is 90. So this has to be angle B. So A and C can be either of these vertices. I'm going to put A here at the top. That's 32 degrees. And it says the length from A to B is 6.2 centimeters. What is the length of segment BC? And again, they want it to the nearest tenth. So I'm going to label my hypotenuse, which I know nothing about. So right away, I've already labeled it. I've already wound it down. It's probably going to be tangent. So from my 32-degree angle, my opposite side is x, and my adjacent side has a length of 6.2. So the tangent of an angle is equal to the length of the opposite divided by the length of the adjacent. Tangent of the angle, we have the angle this time, 32 degrees. The opposite is x, the adjacent is 6.2. I'm going to form a proportion, and to solve a proportion, we're going to cross multiply and solve. So the tangent of 32 times 6.2 is going to be equal to the angle. So I go to my calculator, and I'm going to type in the tangent of 32, close my parenthesis, and I'm going to multiply that by 6.2. And I get an answer of 3.87. And since I'm rounding to the nearest tenth, I look at the number after that 8, which is 7, which is more than 5, so my final answer is 3.9. This is multiple choice, so it's choice 2. All right, so now you guys are going to try the independent practice on your own. I did actually remind you, don't forget to be in degree mode. Don't forget to write down your formulas. Draw yourself a nice picture, and I will be looking forward to seeing your work when you're done. Have a great day.